Welcome, everyone, to All Things Brunswick. Once again, we will enjoy information this evening from the Sheriff's Office in Brunswick County. This month, we have been concentrating on activities, programs, and the knowledge that we can get from our Brunswick County Sheriff's Office. And we do have two more folks tonight from that area that will be speaking on drug enforcement. Before I continue on, I want to thank our technician, TK, who we can't do anything without, and my co-host, Todd. Thank you, Todd. And all of you for joining us, for tuning in and joining us. And we welcome emails, anything you wish to send to me, anything you'd like to see on the show. I am happy to oblige. So please let us know. And without further ado, I will have our guests introduce themselves.
I'm Sergeant Josh Davies with the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office, where I'm currently assigned to the Vice Narcotics Unit.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm Sergeant Robert Simpson, currently assigned to the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office Vice Narcotics Unit.
And thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
We appreciate it. You guys have a very difficult job, I think, because drug enforcement can go in so many different directions, and it involves so many different things.
It does.
So I commend you for doing this.
It definitely keeps us busy.
I bet
Absolutely.
it
I can tell you
does.
that.
How prevalent is it in our county?
It's one of those things, like I tell people all the time, it's prevalent everywhere you go. A lot of times people aren't looking for it, you know. We could go to any county and we're going to see it if you're looking for it and you know what you're looking for.
Right.
No county, no city is exempt. I think it's not the newsworthy thing, right? So people focus on the things that are in the news and the media that they want to highlight, and that's what people zone in on. You don't really hear a lot about the things that are going on in your backyard as far as drug-related investigations a lot. But it is prevalent. But fortunately for us at the Sheriff's Office, and Robert can speak on this, you know, we've been able to stay a very proactive unit as far as our approach and combating, you know, drug crimes. We're not one of those that's just going to sit back and wait for it to happen. We're very busy. We're out there trying to follow up on everything that we can. You know, leads come in a ton of different ways that we can get them. And those are invaluable for us because information is power, you know, and that's how we do our job, was information. So we do the best that we can to follow up on everything. And, you know, Robert can tell you more on, like, the tip line. That is a huge thing for us.
It is. So, like you said, we've had a very good reputation, if you will, reputation of being good at our job for the bad guys.
Yes, you have.
A good reputation with our neighboring agencies and partner agencies that has allowed us to kind of, if you will, keep a tight grip on the drug dealing and drug activity that takes place in Brunswick County. Like you said, there's not any area that's exempt from it. It's just one of those things that you find less people willing to step out into the spotlight in the dealing world in Brunswick. Obviously, there is drug dealers in Brunswick County, as there is everywhere. But you know, you drive right across the bridge over into New Hanover County, and it's a different animal. You drive across the state line into South Carolina, and it's a different animal. And that's no fault of, you know, necessarily fault of them and their agency. It's just we've done such a good job of staying ahead of even our neighboring agencies and kind of keeping the open airness of narcotics out of
It must be difficult being wedged between those two areas.
They are. They're two of our big source areas. So, I mean, as Josh
Kind of in like a
covers the north
corridor.
there. Yeah.
You know, so we have a lot of major highways and interstates that run through our county. You know, we have Highway US 17, we have 74, 76, and now we have I-140. So, you know, if you think about where those routes go and where they can connect you to, you know, you got people that can come, you know, from New York to Florida that are passing through. You know, you have people that want to go west across the country. So a lot of times we end up catching wind of somebody that may be just passing through and might not necessarily be targeting our area to set up shop, but just unlucky on their part, they got caught where we were at. One thing that we've seen over the years, like Robert had touched on as far as our reputation, a lot of the thing that we dealt with, like back when I first started in the narcotics unit in 2017, heroin was a really bad epidemic that we were dealing with at the time. And what we saw in the county was our heroin users in the south in the county would cross the state line into like Horry County, Little River area to purchase their heroin. And what we were dealing with was the aftermath of the overdoses. So they would purchase their drugs in South Carolina, then they would come back, use them, and then we would have to deal with the overdoses. The issue we run into with that is trying to target the actual drug dealer, right? Because,
Out
we
of
all
your
understand.
jurisdiction.
Yeah. So we're not here to arrest away the problem, especially when it comes to people with addiction, because that's not something that's going to be functional and it's really going to deter. Because when you take somebody to jail that has a problem with addiction,
Right.
when the drug dealer's still out selling drugs, right? Because their main focus is making money, not the effects that it has on the community. But that person that really needs help that's in jail, when they get out, most likely they're going to need to go buy drugs again.
Sure.
So the north in the county, same animal. They're dealing with going into Wilmington. Because they have a lot more of those open air markets, like he was touching on, as far as, you can drive down an alleyway and you could see, 5, 6 guys standing there, and you don't necessarily have to know anybody. Just pull up, tell them what you're looking for, and they can sell you the drugs right there on the side of the road and you drive off. So New Hanover County is a little bit easier for us because we do have a good working relationship with New
Yes.
Hanover County, and their narcotics units that we've worked well over the years with them, and especially because it's still being in North Carolina, there are jurisdictional lines there still, but we're very good about working back and forth. South Carolina is a completely different animal, with it being a whole different state. Their legislation is different than ours. So we do have a good relationship with Horry County. It's just dealing with the different legislation and stuff like that because, again, you go just over the state line, now you're dealing with a whole different set of laws.
Wow.
So we do have
That
to work
has to
really
be
closely with them.
difficult,
To be
yeah.
effective, you have to have good partnerships.
Absolutely.
Right. And that must be where Anchor Initiative came to play.
Yeah, so that was a huge thing that Sheriff Ingram decided that he wanted to start because, when he was here, he was a huge centerpiece for the drug unit. This was kind
Right.
of his baby. He was in the drug unit for a long time. He oversaw the drug unit for a long time while he was here. He understood the importance of being proactive, what it meant, because if you show them that you're willing to be out there and stay on the forefront of drug enforcement, that it's going to deter a lot of people from wanting to do
Right.
that. And like Robert touched on, as far as people not wanting to kind of set up shop and put themselves in a bind over here, we have dealt with that where sometimes you might have, let's just say, an informant say that they had a drug dealer that was from Wilmington. It used to be we could lure them over into Leland and maybe, apprehend them and take them to jail. But now you would think that the bridge from New Hanover to Brunswick County is the Golden Gate Bridge. It's the longest bridge ever because they just don't want to cross it, right? Because they know how our enforcement is and how we're not going to just sit back and wait. Same thing with South Carolina. Like, those guys are very leery about even crossing the state line because they know. So, that's a good reputation to have.
Yes.
Because word travels fast, right? And, like any business, word of mouth is huge. So when they start catching wind of how proactive we are, that is a huge help. So I think he understood that from the drug user standpoint, you can't arrest away the problem with addiction.
Right.
These
That's
people
right.
really
You got to
need help.
eliminate the
Yeah.
source.
Yeah, so the source is the biggest problem we have to focus on dealing with, and these people need real help, right?
do.
If they get arrested for a drug crime and then they get out, a lot of times they're right back in the same situation they were before they were arrested, and now they're back having to deal with this whole gamut of the same friends that are still using drugs, and it's like you have
Exactly.
to detach yourself from that situation, and it's a tough talk to have when you're talking with family members, with other family members that are dealing with addiction, because all they want is help for their whether it be loved ones or children, but
Right.
unfortunately those people have to come to that realization for themselves that they really want help. And the Anchor Initiative has been a huge thing because a lot of these people at the time couldn't afford help because treatment is expensive, and when you don't have insurance.
Yes, it is.
So
Yeah.
now that we have this established, and it's been a huge program that we've continued to get funding for from the community, to where these people can volunteer. It's completely up to them.
Yep.
They have to want it for themselves, but If they make that decision, we take them in. We have a representative with the sheriff's office that's completely over the program. They focus on getting them into detox, getting them into a treatment center, and seeing all the steps out through the program.
And doing follow-up, which
Yeah.
is very
That's
important.
the important part.
Well, one thing I think, I just listening to you talk and all, like New Hanover and Horry County and all, and I'm not beating up on their police departments. I think part of the problem is they're so overwhelmed and
Absolutely.
don't have the resources.
Yeah.
Whereas we're not as overwhelmed, so you guys are able to stay ahead of it, and that kind of creates that barrier around as well. You go to places like New York or something, even with all the police officers they have so much of that going on.
Absolutely.
They can't stay on top of
Yeah.
it.
No, absolutely.
It's because you got to have a certain amount of manpower to be effective.
You do, and you have to have the constant
Pressure.
and the constant direction. Directions change with administrations, unfortunately. I
Right.
mean, we
Yes.
see that from the president all the way down, to your local politicians and local department leaders. And if you don't continue and everybody kind of continue with putting that at the forefront of what you're doing, you go backwards. Brunswick's been very lucky for a long time. As long as I've been in law enforcement, they've kind of had that direct pressure on narcotics. If you were to take it off, the problem is it doesn't take long to become
Be overwhelmed.
to become Wilmington or to become
Yeah.
Horry
And it's
County.
not that you have not been without issues, because somebody very dear to me who worked drug enforcement, Steve Lanier, was shot doing his job. So it's not like you haven't had things that made you stop and take a look at what's going on. So, I think that it's a scary position that you hold, because these people who deal, they will do anything to get away.
I mean, it's definitely one of those jobs where the unpredictability is every day.
Yes.
We don't know from every day we go into work, we don't know really what we're going to face.
Yep.
There's no such thing as routine. It doesn't matter how many traffic stops you've conducted, how many search warrants you've executed, how many takedowns you've done. I mean, nothing is routine, because, you get that one guy who say he's a repeat offender, who maybe he's on parole, and he knows that this one more time that he gets caught, that's it for him. The desperation in these people is what really is the scary part doing it, because their desperation is what they're willing to do to hurt you to get
Right.
away. And I think the big thing to keep in mind, kind of what you had touched on as far as the manpower, we're a small unit, but I think our presence makes us bigger. But as we all can see, Brunswick County is exploding in population.
I was going there next.
I think that, if anybody drives around this county like we do just a little bit, and you open your eyes, you see the neighborhoods going up, the apartment complexes, and there's people moving into these houses as fast as they can. And what people have to realize is, for every family that moves in, that's maybe an increase in 911 calls. That's an increase in potential, illegal crime that's going to come, because when more people come, it's to be expected more crime is going to occur.
Right.
So we have to be able to stay on top of it as our community continues to grow so rapidly. The drug unit itself has to have the ability to grow as well, manpower, to stay on top of it. Because if we don't, we can be overwhelmed to where we can't maintain that proactive approach that we're so
Right.
known for, because we want to be effective for the community, because that's the main reason why we're out here doing this.
And that's where we become more like Surrey County or New Hanover. When we get so many people moved in and everything, your staff's only going to grow so much.
Yep.
And generally, staff growth is after the fact.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, by then that can be too late.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that concerns me a little bit because of the explosion in growth.
Yeah.
I'm sure the sheriff would give y'all everything you need,
Absolutely.
but he's got to get the money from somewhere.
That's
Yeah,
exactly
absolutely.
right.
And one thing I was going to ask is, with the president issuing that the drug cartels are now terrorist organization, if say, for example, you come across an actual cartel member and everything, does that provide you any additional resources because he did that?
It kind of bumps these guys to the front of the line. So we have good partnership relationships. I mean, the sheriff's office obviously is great. Our unit does great work. Part of that, as Josh has talked about, is the relationships that you form. Some of those relationships are with partner federal agencies like the DEA, the ATF,
Right.
HSI. So what we want to do is when we get somebody in that kind of situation, with the president's orders and the Department of Justice's guidelines that have come out and their guidance, is that basically the U.S. Attorney's Office, for the most part, it's still evolving, has been directed to make those cases a priority. So what that does do when you say resources, we're not going to get more money or anything like that because we don't have, because of that pressure that we've had on there, we've been lucky enough not to have that growth and that, even the cartel guys. I mean, we can say it, the cartel guys may not know exactly where Brunswick County is, a cartel out of Mexico or, somewhere, but they're definitely know that they don't want to come to this area. I mean, somebody said, hey, there's enough loads getting taken off there. We're going to stay out of there, the kind of the in-between stances. So we're not going to get to that level where, we're going to need funding from them. What we're going to see is we're going to see our cases kind of, when you stumble across that cartel member, get bumped to the front of the line of, hey, this guy needs to be charged,
What about with, say you're doing an investigation and you realize that one or two of the people in there are cartel and all,
Yes, sir.
would that get you upfront assistance with like DEA?
It would.
And having some of their agents come in
absolutely.
and help out and all.
It would, and that part you'd see funding if like we were to stumble into a case, which has happened from time to time, because again, we try to investigate our cases wherever they take us. Obviously, our focus and our priority is Brunswick County, but we also understand and realize that if the dealer or the dealer's dealer lives outside of the county and lives maybe in South Carolina or something like that, that's going to require us to partner with somebody like DEA or one of these federal agencies, and they're going to get us the money we need to continue that. Because again, if we take off the guy between our user and the dealer that's living, say, in Little River or Myrtle Beach or Georgetown,
He's just going to find somebody
he's going to
else.
find somebody else to bring it down here. If they know there's a customer base here, they're always going to be continuing trying to get the end product here because that's where money's at.
Is there a specific age that is targeted?
Drugs.
Yeah, I don't think that I
No?
can say. I mean, because we've seen it from, your high school age student all the way up to, somebody in their 70s or 80s. It's really depends on what drug you're talking about, the demographic, the situation. Like with the elderly, we've seen a lot when prescription pills were really bad in our area before we had like the crackdown from the doctors who were just writing prescriptions over and over,
The Oxy.
without really, doing a count on it and really taking under control. You'd see these elderly people that just had a stockpile of prescription medication that were selling it to basically supplement their disability.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and it was prevalent. We did see that from time to time that they would kind of use that as an avenue to make money, because a lot of these people were elderly. They were living off their Social Security. So we've had them tell us point blank that, they were looking as another source of income just to try to live.
Oh, wow.
So again, if you're looking for like a definition of a drug dealer, I don't think there really is one. Just like a drug user, we've seen people that have successful lives that also have second lives. You see people that are really good at hiding their addiction from maybe their loved ones or family members. Say they own a business, but we've seen people using different drugs like heroin, fentanyl, and say cocaine. Now the big push that we're seeing now in our county is methamphetamine because of the price. I used to tell people that drug choices and trends are kind of like fashion trends. They kind of go around and then they come back. So now we're starting to see, when you first started hearing about meth in Brunswick County, it was shake and bake labs, which was going to be like going to your local pharmacy with some friends trying to buy a bunch of Sudafed and then basically making it yourself. Small amounts, it's really ineffective, but ever since they came up with the Sudafed log to where now they're checking IDs and they would basically flag you if you purchase so much at a time, it'll alert law enforcement and the pharmacy to not sell anything to you. That has really hindered that. But now
they could make it out of
Yep.
that?
So you take some household products, Sudafed being the main ingredient, and then you could buy the rest from your local hardware store, Walmart, and like you said, shake and bake. You're just literally sitting there
They're
making
lucky
it.
they didn't die.
Well,
That would happen a lot.
They blow up.
It does
sometimes.
A lot of it, they're highly flammable, highly explosive, and it's dangerous. I mean, there's been a lot of house fires that have started from it, small explosions, but you just don't see it anymore. And the reason why is because, like we were touching on the cartel. So the cartel, their main focus is making money, right? So they kind of took on methamphetamine as like their main money source, because for them, they can basically purchase all of the ingredients to make like real crystal meth in Mexico at pennies on the dollar from China, the chemicals they need, mass produce it, and then they're just pumping it to the United States. So now this stuff is very pure and highly addictive and very cheap. So at the end of the day, the users want to get high, and they also want to get more bang for their buck. So whatever's the cheapest thing that they can get their hands on. So that's kind of the problem that we're running into right now. It's flooding our area. It's super cheap.
So is the fentanyl starting to drop off, and this is starting to precede
No.
it, or the fentanyl still?
Fentanyl is still a huge issue. Those are the two main combatants we've seen. I mean, we've sent stuff off when we send drugs off to our state lab for testing. I don't think at this point we've really seen a drug that we've sent off that hasn't had a trace of fentanyl in it.
You're kidding.
They're putting it in
Where
everything.
do they? So the dealers deal the fentanyl too,
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's a
And-
huge thing.
and where do they get it?
So a lot of it's
Mexico.
sourced from China is where you're getting the fentanyl from, because it's I mean, like a lot of these opioids, they were created for legitimate reasons for medical purposes. So fentanyl was actually first created for hospital
Fentanyl
settings.
is a very scary drug.
is.
It is.
Even if you use it for someone who's hospitalized,
Absolutely.
you have to be so careful.
Yeah. Well, what we started seeing, like with the heroin trend, is when heroin was really bad, what you see is their mindset's very skewed with addiction, especially when it comes to the opioids, because people wanted the strongest stuff that they could get. And so, I had been to an overdose call before where it was an overdose death. Somebody had passed away from using heroin. Some friends were there, and they had made some comments about, wanting that stuff that he took, right? So that's just the type of mindset that these people are under when they're dealing with this type of addiction, because they just don't see, like outside looking in, you wouldn't see somebody laying dead on the floor saying that you want to take the same stuff. But they understood that that was the most potent product that they could get their hands on. So slowly, as heroin continued to go and become an issue in our area, they started slowly mixing with fentanyl. And the reason behind that is because the strength of fentanyl is so strong that
And
they
it's
could
cheap.
Yeah, and they could take a small amount of fentanyl to cut with their heroin and make their heroin go longer. So again, like anything, every drug dealer is in the business to make money.
So the dealer is the one that mixes it
a lot of the
before
times.
he sells it.
Yep. So that was the main thing that we were seeing, is now you're starting to see a heroin fentanyl mixture. So now these people that were used to just heroin were starting to take fentanyl mixed in with it, and the potency is so much stronger. We were getting a huge influx of overdose deaths because they didn't understand the strength of it, right? Because it was so new. They just they didn't know how to anticipate it. So we'd go to these overdose calls, and you'd hit them with several doses of Narcan that still was ineffective. Where most of the time with heroin, one dose of Narcan was efficient to get them to come back. But now you're talking 3, 4, 5 doses of Narcan with fentanyl at times just to get people coherent again because of the strength.
If you can bring them back.
If you can, and that's the thing. So now it's slowly transitioned to where it's just straight fentanyl now.
And just like
my
Josh said, it's all
word.
about cost for them. I mean, heroin was potent. Obviously, it was an opioid. It was very strong. And then fentanyl came around, and it takes much less fentanyl with a cut. And you could also get, back at that time, when Josh was talking about when heroin was big, a kilo of heroin, which is something we'd have to get the federal government involved with because of the cost, would be around $70,000 to purchase 1 kilo, so 1,000 grams of of heroin. That same fentanyl nowadays you can get for $25,000-$30,000, so you're getting it for less than half the cost, and it stretches so much further, so you're able to put far less fentanyl in a dosage or a amount that you're selling with mixture of the cutting agent. Put that out there, and and stretch that $30,000 so much further. And again, it's all about money, and it's so, and it'd be stronger. And
My
then
goodness.
these guys don't have degrees in chemistry, or probably aren't even
They
good
just
at
experiment
baking.
and
They
then
are.
give it to somebody, and if they don't die, okay, we'll
Must be
send it
good.
out. Well, then 10 more people die, and they're like, well, who cares? We're making money on it now.
Yeah.
And they know that they can make the more money, the stronger they can get it, without reaching that level of killing their customer. Because that's the question we get a lot is, why do people put fentanyl in their drug if it's going to kill their customer? Aren't they just killing their, their
You got to
end-
look at all the
end
ones
user?
that didn't kill that are still buying.
That's exactly it. Their goal is to get it as close to that, because that's getting the person as high as possible, and then take it and cut it off right there. And obviously the mixture it's not a scientific process for these guys. So
And on that note, folks, think long and hard about that. And we are going to break to pay some bills. We'll be back. Stay with us. Wow. What a great place we all call home. From colorful sunsets to panoramic coastal views. The best attractions are its people, a community of friends and family. J.K. Summers, attorney at law, recognizes this fact and is proud of his work to protect their rights. Put your trust in him to prepare wills and trusts, real estate transactions, contract and LLC creations, and criminal, traffic, and civil matters. Visit oakislandlaw.com or call 910-253-5572. J.K. Summers, Attorney at Law.
Veteran Awareness sponsored by You Are Not Alone. Today's veteran homeless rate is approximately 19,750, and the numbers are declining because of the various veteran programs. If you are a veteran you know is homeless, please call 877-4AID-VET. This is a confidential and toll-free call. From this veteran to other veterans, please be there to help our brother and sister veterans. Again, the number is 1-877-424-3838. And thank you for your service.
Welcome back, folks, to All Things Brunswick. We have with us today two gentlemen from the Brunswick County Sheriffs Office, Sergeant Robert Simpson and Sergeant Joss Davies, and they are in drug enforcement,
Yes, ma'am.
right? A very scary area to be in, as far as I'm concerned. We're talking about all the different things that do happen. Does it become a little scarier when we are overrun by tourists?
I think that you can see that, we always try to plan and prepare that, during our busy season when, we know tourism's going to take off and the summer hits, that we're going to get an influx in some things because, like we were touching on earlier with the amount of people that are moving here so rapidly and what that's going to bring. We know that, at times our population can double or triple with tourism, in a few months. And what that potentially can bring when you got transients that are passing through that say they might want to set up shop for a little bit that nobody even knows who these people are, right? So they can kind of go under the radar and then, make a little money here and then they're off and setting up shop somewhere else. We have seen that from time to time. But I would say that we have been able to stay on top of it pretty well to where that type of crime, as far as like major crime, hasn't really affected us that much with tourism itself. You're going to get your petty stuff at times with like
Sure.
larcenies and things like that. But as far as like the major crime, I don't think we've seen a huge influx due to that, which is good.
So
And I hope it stays that way.
It's kind of the same all year round.
Yeah, I mean, I think like anything, I wouldn't say that selling drugs is a fair weather trade, right? They're going to do that every day, all day.
Right.
We just have to continue to adapt. And, I think the biggest thing we've learned over the years is with technology adapts, so do drug dealers, and we do too. So that poses challenges that, as these guys are trying to change their ways, because again, we deal with a lot of repeat offenders. A lot of people that have been arrested before by us for selling drugs, people that are on probation, people that are on parole. So we're dealing with people that are knowledgeable in the judicial system to a degree from them being through it. And, as they go to prison, they learn different tricks of the trade, right? So other people are in there, and that's why they bounce ideas off and try to figure out how other people were, caught by law enforcement and what tricks they used or techniques, and they try to figure out a way to combat that. So we're always having to try to stay one step ahead, and it's tough. It's a completely different animal, especially with technology. That's huge, and it's not going to get any easier, I would say, as we start seeing all these different things coming out with social media and apps. Those are the big things that we're seeing now with, you have encrypted telecommunication and things like that people can exchange, conversations that, it's hard for us to intercept. So, like anything, I think we just have to stay proactive and stay up to date on what's going on and current and stay knowledgeable, and that's how we can be effective, because if we don't know what's going on, it's going to be hard for us to
Right.
adapt to it.
Right.
You had talked about basically the rehab and everything. Do we have a robust rehab in Brunswick County? I mean, is it going to be able to handle growth? Because with growth, there's going to be additional.
I don't think
People
all
needing
of
help.
them go within the county, Todd. I know that the Anchor Initiative program, they look for wherever they can place them, whether
Okay.
it be Charlotte, Raleigh, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know that they've recently opened a new detox center in Wilmington that has a certain amount of beds, and I think some of those are for the Anchor Initiative. They've kind of partnered with them. But as far as like the actual long-term treatment facilities with our Anchor Initiative, the first step is getting them through a local detox center, right? And that's going to be the first step, first phase of that program. And once they get them there, that's when they start working on finding that long-term treatment. And they have a lot of different facilities in North and South Carolina, I believe, that they've partnered with and they've worked with to try to find what's the most feasible, what's the quickest bed that they can get this person in to get treatment. Because again, we're dealing with an issue that, is an epidemic nationwide, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of people that are looking for treatment. So sometimes it can take a little bit for these people to, find a place of treatment, like a bed for them. So
They
they might have to
certainly
stay.
can't sit around and wait.
Yeah,
Well,
so
the
long-
longer that gap is, the more likely they are to fall back in that hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think that they do remain them in detox until they can get them in a long-term treatment facility. So they don't, if it's going to be a little bit for them to get that bed, they don't just let them go back to their old ways, let them out of the hospital, go back. Because again, like we all know, as soon as they go back to their same situation that they were in before, the chances of them relapsing and using again is very high. You have to kind of take yourself out of that setting in order to really reset and kind
Right.
of change yourself. So I think that's the biggest thing. Do we need more treatment centers? Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, we're going to have more and more people just moving to this area. I wouldn't say just Brunswick County, but between Myrtle Beach, between New Wilmington. I mean, just the East Coast right here is a very popular spot that we're seeing a huge influx, and it's only going to continue to be a problem. I don't want to sound naive and think that we're going to, solve the world's problem on the drug epidemic. We're going to do everything we can to stay proactive and productive in combating that. But, we're not going to just solve it tomorrow. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of different resources for us to be effective when being treatment.
When do you think that it became a real issue? I mean,
80s?
think back.
70s?
No, it was before that. It definitely was before that.
I think when it became, I think it's had an issue. I think it's been an issue for a long time.
Yeah.
Probably, my parents' age and their lifetime, they saw it. But I think when it became a problem in reality for the general public seeing it was going to be crack. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I
Yeah.
think the introduction of crack cocaine is when that's when you first saw it kind of out and open in front of everybody. And,
Right.
in the different communities. And when I started in law enforcement, I was in Wilmington for the first part of my career, and that was what you saw was crack cocaine. I mean, there was heroin, don't get me wrong. There was obviously marijuana use and stuff like that, but crack was the big drug, and that's where you saw people out open selling it, and the highly addictive nature of it. And then unfortunately it's just progressed over the years to more and more addictive and more harsh narcotics.
I think in our parents' era, I believe that everybody turned to alcohol.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
It was actually it was a legal drug. I mean, you could, get wasted and not go to jail unless you were driving like that or whatever. And then I think that marijuana started the big influx of drugs.
Well,
And I think that was probably in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I think that, and I this is just my opinion, but it has just progressed to the point where they're just looking for different and more and more
Exactly.
powerful every single year.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, you think about the marijuana. Unfortunately, it was the first, it was the first drug that outside entities outside of the United States saw that they
Yeah.
could import and make money, and once they saw that, and the United States had a large population, so it was a large population of people making money. So that was a great customer base.
I think that we were doing the little trade-off with Mexico.
Yes.
It started with their illegal planes flying it in. And I
Giant
remember
bells.
reading,
ma'am.
different things about the planes finding these landing strips that weren't known to everybody. And they would fly it into areas like in California and so forth. And then, of course, they were trying to bring it across in other ways too.
Absolutely.
But, and then it just wasn't enough. That wasn't enough. They had to go to something bigger and better and more powerful.
I just
So-
want to know who the guy was that was walking through the jungle and goes, "Ooh, it ain't tobacco, but let's try smoking it."
Like in most things, most inventions, it only takes one person to figure it out, right?
Exactly.
And I think with the drug trade itself, it's kind of like an evolution. When to sell drugs, the idea is to make money, right? But with making money illegally, most of the time, what comes with it is violence. And
Yes.
I think that's where you see where you start to see, especially in these more dense populated bigger cities, is like the gang violence and stuff like that that is associated 9 times out of 10 with drug trade, because everybody's trying to assert themselves in dominance and power.
Well, how else are they going to make their money?
Well, and different drugs, and again, you start to see like what the trend is with the drug of choice in your community by the drug dealers you're apprehending, right? Because at the end of the day, drug dealers are in it. It's a business. They're in it to make money, and they're only going to sell a product that people want. It's no different than if you go to your local Walmart and you're going to see them switching out products on the shelf, right? Because they're going to go with the trends of what people are looking for. So when you start seeing a trend in a certain drug that you keep arresting these people selling, you're going to say, well, that's probably what the users are asking for. And that's really what we started to see with the methamphetamine in our area. That's kind of the drug of choice that people are starting to transition to. And it slowly started transitioning with our heroin users starting to go towards methamphetamine. And it really started to blow our minds a little bit initially because the two drugs are like completely different on the body, because an opiate like heroin or fentanyl is a downer. Usually puts people in a real lethargic state, and with methamphetamine, it's an high upper, where people might not sleep for days. Then they start to go into like a psychosis of insomnia because they haven't slept, so now they're kind of seeing things. There's a lot more unpredictability with somebody's behavior that's been using methamphetamine pretty heavily. Because at least when we were dealing with heroin, we knew that usually they were like a very downplayed, like lethargic state, kind of out of it. Methamphetamine, you don't know what you're going to walk up on because, again, say the person's been up for multiple days. Now they feel like they're hearing voices. They feel like there's bugs crawling under their skin. They're picking at themselves. You don't know how the person's going to react to you. Because they might, when you walk up on a call or to approach them, they might not even see you as law enforcement in their state of mind. So you really have to be careful with dealing with these people that are using this drug. And because here's the thing, like I told you, they're mass producing it and it's made out of chemicals. So I don't know a lot of things. A lot of times when you can make a drug out of household chemicals and you're ingesting, it's probably healthy for you. So you have to think the effects that it does on the human body and what that's doing to that person's state of mind over a long-term use. But what we could see in the trend is just the price that when it hit the market, it's so competitive to where it's so profitable for a drug dealer to want to look towards methamphetamine to sell. Absolutely. Because it's so cheap and it's so potent that it's going to get the users very high, very addicted to the substance, that they're going to continue to come back as a repeat customer, and the profit margin is huge. So that's kind of what we're starting to see now and why the switch is going to that. So slowly, I would say that overdoses as far as from fentanyl ahead, we don't see that from methamphetamine as much as far as the overdoses directly associated with that.
I'm
not saying that it
surprised.
can't, but most of the time it's from like heavy opioid use like fentanyl or
Why
heroin.
would you, if that's a combination of whatever you have and you're making it, why would you put it in your body?
It's
Because so you really, when you buy it or get it from someone, you don't know what you're getting. You have no idea.
It's always a gamble. You know, I think with any
Good
drug, you really
Lord.
don't know what you're getting your hands onto. You know, we've had people like when the heroin fentanyl trade was big, you know, in the northern part of the county, in like New Hanover County, they would sell heroin in little small wax spindles, and you know, these people would put anything in there because you really didn't know what it was, the powder substance that was in there. So you'd see things like baby formula. And they pretty much cut it with anything that looks similar. So, you know, you'd get these users, you know, that would use it and they wouldn't feel effects because it wasn't real drugs inside of it, right? Because they were just trying to rip people off and make money. So I think anytime a user is going to a drug dealer to purchase drugs, it's always a gamble of what they're playing, kind of like Russian roulette.
absolutely.
Don't know if it's the last time they'll ever use again because of an overdose, or even what they're ingesting itself is even remotely what they purchased. So, you know,
It is incredible.
The sad thing is you know, you talk about you can basically go under your kitchen sink and come up with what you need to make drugs. You could also go under your kitchen sink and get what you need to make explosives.
Exactly.
And you're putting it in your body.
You're right. And
Something's got to give.
it's like Josh just talked about. It's, you know, the evolution of super labs in Mexico, where they, you know, it's the one thing we don't, like you said, we don't see anymore. It used to be that, you know, you'd stumble across a meth lab, you know, once a month or something like that. You'd hear about it in the news, at least somewhere in a neighboring county. They're always finding, you know, a meth lab. I can't remember the last time I've seen a meth lab. It's been so long, and it's because it's so much easier and cheaper, like you said, to go over there and make it. I mean, you could, when meth started here, you were paying $1,000, $1,200 an ounce, you know, for 28 grams of meth. Now you can get that same one for $200, $300, and it's just because, and instead of it being 60% pure, you know, when we get meth, we send it a lot of times to the DEA lab. The DEA lab does a good job of telling us, and they actually break down how pure it is. And that stuff nowadays comes back, you know, 95 to 99% pure of methamphetamine, and that's a super high for a drastically lower price, you know, and people feel like they're less likely to get ripped off with meth, you know, because it has a more distinctive look. You know, you getting heroin in a baggie. It could be anything. Meth, you know, for the most part, is meth. And,
What does it look like?
crystal. It's almost like similar to rock salt is about the only thing that you'll see
Rock
somebody
candy.
yeah,
try
they
to
look like
fake.
little shards of glass. Sometimes look real broken up in a bag.
And how do they take it?
There's a couple different ways. You know, we've seen it. We've seen people. The traditional way originally was smoking it with a glass pipe.
Yep.
But then, you know, like I told you, a lot of our evolution was from heroin users now switching to methamphetamine, and most of our heroin users were intravenous, so they were using with needles. So then they figure out a way that they could actually inject the methamphetamine to get more of an intense high.
What do they do? How do they do that?
Oh, you're
They
breaking
melt
it down
it?
and mixing it with a solution to put it in a syringe and just directly injecting it into a vein. We've had people snorting it as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of like the main ways that we're
That
seeing
sounds
it done.
painful, snorting it.
I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Of course, we've never done it.
Yeah,
but
I
it's,
would say anyway, it's probably going to have some effects for sure. But they get creative as far as trying to figure out a way to ingest and things like that. But again, you're talking to somebody who's dealing with addiction, so trying to reason or understand from the outside looking in with a person who's never dealt with it's hard. When you're asking these people why they're doing it, it's everybody has different reasons on how they kind of ended up where they were at. A lot of the heroin users you used to talk to back in the day, they all kind of got hooked on it from legitimate medical reasons, whether they got hurt on the job, maybe had chronic back pain, and they were going to a doctor long term. They were prescribed pain medication from a doctor, and then they started cracking down pretty heavy on these doctors overprescribing. And what they were doing essentially is now, because opiates are one of those things that the long-term effects of as you take them, the more your body depends on them to function, kind of like an alcoholic needs alcohol to function normally. Well, they build up a tolerance, so you need more and more and more over time to feel the effects. So when you go and you just cut this person off that's been on pain medication for, say, 5 years, and today the doctor says, I'm not going to prescribe it to you, now these people are
It's
sick.
a hard crash.
And they need something, so that's when they switched to heroin. So they found another way to self-medicate, basically, because they had no other avenue. So a lot of it wasn't because these people were just out, wanting to buy drugs from your
How
local
do they
drug
do
dealer.
heroin? How do they do that?
Most of the time, and the biggest way you were seeing it was intravenous with a needle, where they were injecting it.
same process.
Yeah, same process.
And what does that look like?
That was
I'm
when,
not that
Yeah.
naive, really, but I just.
that's what you see in the movies when
mean,
somebody was using
yeah.
a spoon.
And heat,
Typically using a spoon,
liquefying
a little
it.
bit, but a little liquid, almost like you're melting, salt or sugar in your kitchen, and basically heating it up with that little bit of fluid. And then a lot of times you'd see them use the end of a cigarette or a cotton ball to act as some kind of filter as they draw the heroin, the new now liquid form heroin, into the needle before injecting it into a vein. And so those were the items we looked for back in the day. I mean, you looked for a car, you looked in a car and you saw a burnt spoon, you were like, all right, this guy's using heroin, and that was part of what you used to identify, your addict before anything else.
And then all kinds of things come into play when you're talking needles,
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
which we had the huge influx of HIV. And that was from needle use, pretty much. So it's like this never-ending story,
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
and it's so very sad. Do we have an issue in our county in the schools to a point where it's very serious?
I would say that it's sporadic. From time to time, we have a good relationship with our SROs that work directly in the schools. Fortunately for us, there's an SRO assigned at every school in the county, which is huge.
And the kids love them.
And they're a huge asset because, they can get to know these kids on a personal level and kind of, see some trends that might be happening. A lot of times if we're seeing it, it's in the high school level. But, I would say that the chance of them getting a hold of something, is always there, right? Because it's out there in the community. And a lot of it comes down to who your kids are associating with, because a lot of times it's guilty by association, right? So if they're around a setting of kids and, one kid has something and he said, hey, you want to try this? And it kind of stumbles down. I would say the main thing that we're seeing in the school system right now is going to be like the marijuana or the edibles, like the gummies are a popular thing that the kids are doing now. And that's what we're seeing. I don't think we've had a huge conversation or problem as far as like the harder drugs being found in the school system. If it is, it might be like an isolated incident, like one kid here and there, but
Maybe somebody in his house or something.
yeah, so nothing like we've had SRO say, hey, I think we have a kid at our school selling methamphetamine,
Now, didn't they at one time, excuse me, have an issue with the kids and what was it called, huffing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a trend at one time.
Is that
Didn't go
still
very well.
prominent, or
We haven't really seen that in a long time.
Not so much. More of that's kind of transitioned into the party scene, the whippets, the inhaling, the and other kind of inhalants, whether it's nitrous or whatever. That's mostly you're going to see in like the party scene now, and obviously Brunswick County doesn't have a very large nightlife of rave clubs or anything like that. So we've been lucky, and we honestly don't run across that very often.
Good.
Usually, if we do, it's somebody like you said, like a transient coming through the county.
I read on that and I thought, good Lord, what are they thinking?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing is to definitely stay proactive in the schools just because it's out there. I think one thing that we haven't touched on, like when we were talking about fentanyl, I think, the traditional thing that people think about when they think about it is like the powder form.
Exactly.
But a big trend that we're seeing in our community and like in surrounding areas is what we call pressed pills. So basically what we're now talking about is an issue where these people are making pills to mimic legitimate prescription pills like roxicodone 30 milligram. They're little blue
How
tablets.
do they do that?
Well, they get a pill press. And you'd be surprised at how, the
Easy
internet
it
is a crazy tool, right? So you can get anything your heart desires from the internet.
Yep.
And they can order it, and they buy the ingredients, and they're basically pressing these pills in their home, mass producing them, and pushing them out there. And what we started seeing was people were taking these pills thinking initially that they were legitimate prescription pills, not looking too closely into them, but not realizing that now these pills have fentanyl in them, and that we were getting overdoses and
Oh, my
overdose deaths from them
gosh.
because they had no idea what they were taking. That's where we stumbled upon the fake pills. I mean, we were running into a situation where at times there wasn't a pill that we were seizing off the side of the road and sending it to our lab that was a real legitimate pill. They were all like man-made in some degree with
In this
fentanyl.
county?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, my word.
And that's a national trend. And, what scared me the most with pressed pills is, not to downplay any drug at all, but, like he talks about different drugs having a different effect, you'd see a kid, especially, I say a kid, a teenager, a young adult that maybe had a prescription for Xanax at one point, really liked Xanax, and they thought they were doing a Xanax. And these drug dealers, drug traffickers, again, trying to avoid detection from law enforcement, we would notice the little pressed blue pills, for the Roxys. Occasionally you'd come across a Xanax bar that was tested positive for being fentanyl, and somebody's thinking they're doing a Xanax bar, and it's a completely different reaction. It's a completely different drug, and obviously one's far more dangerous, to their person than the other. So,
Can you tell us percentage-wise how many deaths we have?
Just
Overdoses.
specifically related overdoses. I honestly don't want to throw out like an exact number because it does fluctuate from time to time where we do see it.
there can be periods of time where you don't have an overdose death for a while, for like an extended period of time, and then you can all of a sudden have one or two.
And again, I think that comes down to what we were talking about before, where these users or these drug dealers are wanting to kind of push a product as close to the cusp as they can as far as potency. And, we're starting now to see, because like any business, you want to trademark your product, right? To know, like, this is a good product for people to buy. You want a way to have your stamp on it to where people know if they want this product, this is who they go to buy it. So they started doing that to where initially, like in like the northern area of the county where they were selling the wax spindles, they were using stamps. They would stamp them with different like mimics or slogans, things like that, so that people knew, like, say you wanted something that was like white lightning and that would have a little saying on it. You knew if like these were really strong heroin bags that you would want to find the guy that was selling those bags. Well, what we started seeing now is the trend of fentanyl that's colored now with different colors, whether it be blue or purple or things like that. That's what we're seeing being pushed out now to, you're having users basically requesting the purple fentanyl because they know, hey, that's the strongest stuff right now. So I think when we start seeing the problem of like a rash of overdoses and especially overdose deaths in like a short period of time, like he was saying with the trends, it's because maybe there was a bad batch that got out there, got pushed very quickly because of the potency, and people just couldn't handle how strong it was. So you get a product that's out there, and you got a lot of people that are known for a certain dealer, and then they get a hold of a certain product and it spreads like wildfire. Now you have overdose deaths, and then sometimes it's in a very controlled area.
And folks, think about that again while we break for another spot to pay some bills. But please stay with us. We'll be right back. What a great place we all call home. From colorful sunsets to panoramic coastal views. The best attractions are its people, a community of friends and family. J.K. Summers, attorney at law, recognizes this fact and is proud of his work to protect their rights. Put your trust in him to prepare wills and trusts, real estate transactions, contract and LLC creations, and criminal, traffic, and civil matters. Visit oakislandlaw.com or call 910-253-5572. J.K. Summers, attorney at law.
Veteran Awareness sponsored by You Are Not Alone. Today's veteran homeless rate is approximately 19,750, and the numbers are declining because of the various veteran programs. If you or a veteran you know is homeless, please call 877-4AID-VET. This is a confidential and toll-free call. From this veteran to other veterans, please be there to help our brother and sister veterans. Again, the number is 1-877-424-3838. And thank you for your service.
Welcome back, folks, to All Things Brunswick. We are about out of time for this evening, but I'm going to turn it over to our guests. Please tell us where folks can look to for information and whatnot.
I think the biggest tool that we can kind of push out to the community that's really going to be a big benefit to us to help the community do our job better is our anonymous tip line. So that's accessible through the Sheriff's Office app that's out in the App Store that you can download,
Right.
or the Sheriff's Office website. It's can be a completely anonymous tip that you can put in. But the thing that we tell people all the time is you guys are out in the community every day. You guys are seeing things. You guys notice things. And sometimes go with your gut. If you think something's going on at your neighbor's house, but you're just afraid to say anything directly, feel free to submit that tip. We get all the emails that come through. We investigate them thoroughly to make sure that if there is something to it, we look into it. You can be as specific as you want or as vague as you want. You don't have to leave your name or number, but we will follow up on it. And a lot of times, a lot of our cases are generated from community-based complaints that are generated from people seeing things out in the community, because there's a lot more citizens in this community than there are drug agents. So we
Right.
need your help to be effective.
I cannot thank you both enough for joining us today. Now, I have learned so much about this. Please be safe.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
and do come back.
We will.
would
Thanks
like
for
to
having
have
us.
you back.
Absolutely.
Todd, thanks for being with us tonight, and thanks to TK. Folks, join us next week for All Things Brunswick. I believe that we are going to be starting with our judges, so do join us. Thank you again.
All right, thank
Yes, ma'am.
you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank-